Hello, viewers, and welcome to the latest episode of The Huddle. I'm with Imogen Moss, Associate Solicitor at Poppleston Allen. Imogen, thanks for joining us.
Hi, nice to meet you, Tim. Thank you for having me.
It's no problem at all. Looking forward to speaking about kind of UK gaming law and regulation, and there's no better time to talk about it, really. I wanted to say no worse time, but I think it's better in terms of there's so much going on, and there's actually something happening after so long of a wait for the white paper. To start off with, can you just tell us a little bit about your role and what Poppleston Allen does, and that can kind of lead us into where what we're gonna talk about later.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a solicitor at Poppleston Allen Solicitors. I've been here for quite a while now, part of the furniture, and we deal with licensing under the Licensing Act 2003. So alcohol licenses, everything from new premises licenses to all the administrative stuff and everything in between. And I work specifically in our gambling team, dealing, again, everything from operating licenses, changes of corporate control, right the way through to permit applications.
So, like I already alluded to, a productive time, a busy time for a lawyer, a solicitor working in gambling.
Mhm.
Can you walk us through the latest state of play with the white paper, and of course, very recent development has quite accelerated that in that we had stake limits introduced for online slots in the UK.
So, as we're all conscious, the white paper was published back in April, which feels a bit like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah.
And it was split into different chapters. So we had different elements. I won't go into all of them, but things like online protections, marketing and advertising, gambling commission power and resources, for example. There's been some consultations that have gone in. So we've had the DCMS land-based consultation, we've had the GC summer consultation and the levy consultation, to name but a few. And on a majority of them, we are waiting for the responses to the consultations. So that's kind of like the next big step in the process. There's the December consultation as well, and that ends in early March. That's not specific to the white paper, but it's looking at proposals to update its statement of principles for determining financial penalties. So that'll be of interest as well. I think the kind of pertinent points for us at the moment are the financial risk steps. So there was a blog that was just published. It was last Friday, so we're in February now. It was on the 22nd of Feb, and that was really just to help explain some common misconceptions, I think, regarding the proposals. And the blog recognised that there's a need to have a balance between sort of freedom of choice and also protection for customers as well. And the proposal is from the Commission to introduce frictionless, light touch vulnerability checks after listening to the responses to the consultation. The proposal is to do it by way of a pilot. The mechanics and the kind of the actual threshold numbers haven't been hammered out as yet. It's likely to be more large scale licenses, and we anticipate that pilot will run for about 4 to 6 months. So there's that is kind of at the forefront. And then just yesterday, actually, so the 26th of February, we had the debate in the Commons about there was some calls for the affordability checks to actually be scrapped due to the risk of players being seen to go to the black market and an imposition on personal freedoms, I guess. Voices were, there was voices to both sides of the argument, but it was very clear from the Minister with Responsibility for Gambling that these affordability checks are going to be coming through, and he insisted that they would be a significant improvement on what's in place already. And one big thing that you've also alluded to as well is we've had the confirmation from the DCMS on the £2 maximum stake for under 25s. So it comes following a 10-week consultation period, and the proposal is that there will be a limit set for online games from September this year. Again, timeframes are kind of loose, I would guess, because we have seen, timescales slip as things have gone on through the years. But there's looking at a maximum £2 for 18 to 24-year-olds and a £5 limit for adults aged 25 and over. That'll require secondary legislation and a 6-week transition period to be implemented to allow sort of a smooth changeover, really. And of course, we've still got some more consultations to come. And then looking at the responses to the consultations, when we'll hopefully get a clearer picture as to what things are going to look like, and a timetable for those changes to be implemented. So even though it feels like the white paper's been around quite some time and we're coming up for nearly a year now, there's still quite a lot of legwork to be done by both the Commission and the DCMS.
A few interesting points there. I say thank you for the breakdown of the consultations, because I think just follow, if someone was following this loosely, that will, as you kind of point out, last April we have the white paper, and it almost feels like to someone, an outsider, it might feel like nothing's happened since then. But of course, there's ongoing consultations. There's always something, in essence. And a couple of things you pointed out, that the pilot scheme, obviously we've had Tim Miller from the Gambling Commission on the Huddle talking about that concept quite recently. And yes, affordability checks. I mean, I don't think I'm going to necessarily put you on the spot for your take on that, because there are two very, very opposing points of view on that. And also, I think the stake limits, just what's interesting is that a few people, probably mainly critics, have said that you're separating policies for under 25s and over 25s. And then they've said, well, what if we started doing that in areas other than gambling? It opens up a whole new area.
It's been quite a divisive topic, and you can kind of look at it from both sides of the argument, really, I guess. You know, would you apply the same to other things in life, you know? And if you're a 24-year-old paying a mortgage and paying tax, it's an interesting debate to be had. But it's been announced, it's coming in, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point also is interesting, that I think they're supposed to come in September, but I think you kind of pointed out basically that if just because it's slated for September, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that there could be some delay, there could be something else that comes in, that kind of thing.
Who knows? I mean, the proposal is for September, but obviously until we actually see everything go through, you know, I would keep that time frame very much in the forefront of your mind for any preparation that you've got to do, but just keep your eye on whether that timeline moves or not.
Yeah, no, I think that's a key point. And I think when it's announced that it's September, I might take that as face value, and think that's a given. But it's a good point to say that it's fluid and it could change. And especially we had, you know, the white paper had several kind of release dates, and eventually the opposite way, that one didn't happen until later on. So from a solicitor's perspective, from your what you're doing on a kind of the day-to-day, and maybe other policymakers as well, what are the areas and the main work that's kind of taking up your time with the white paper, any gambling regulation at the moment?
I mean, I suppose it's really trying to translate the direction of travel from what's coming out from the DCMS and from the Gambling Commission, and sort of providing advice as we go along on that. Again, until we have responses to consultations, until we have sort of hard and fast information, it's, you know, we're at that point at the moment where we're still waiting for the devil in the detail, basically. So, you know, and especially in respect of any changes that require any statutory instruments as well. And I think, you know, for policymakers, I'd imagine that the financial checks point and the frictionless thing is taking up quite a lot of the time. I can imagine that's quite a challenge to kind of work out how that will be actioned in real terms, I guess. As well as looking at how the pilot scheme is going to launch and run. And I would assume that the levy is taking up quite a bit of policymakers' time as well. Design, implementation, administration, consideration about government and accountability needed for the levy, decisions on destinations and commissioning as well matter for the government. And again, their biggest workload at the moment will be going through and publishing those responses to consultations and delivering timescales for changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the time of recording, it hasn't happened, but at the time this goes out, it may well have happened. The Betting Gaming Council AGM is this week, and I'm just anticipating kind of a lot of discussion, a lot of kind of operator contributions, and especially, as you say, on the financial checks topic. Another topic I wanted to discuss with you, particularly Poppleston and Alan, because we've spoken to you guys before and some of your colleagues about this is advertising. I'd say advertising restrictions in the UK. It's slightly different because it's with the Advertising Standards Authority, so it's not necessarily DCMS or Gambling Commission or anything like that. But I wanted to just almost as a blanket statement, maybe to provoke a response, but to put it to you that I personally, in this case, even though there's some things we've already discussed, like financial checks, where I feel people are perhaps taking their opinions too far. But for me, I think advertising restrictions on gambling in the UK, I think they're too restrictive. So I'm going to put that out there and see what you think or what you can tell me.
Yeah, I mean, the gambling industry is slightly different because of the operating license conditions that we have to comply with as operators. So thinking about compliance with the CAP and BCAP codes is of fundamental importance there. We know that throughout 2023, the ASA has been really active. And I think they've been making full use of artificial intelligence to monitor and have overview and regulate online advertising. And I think since August 2023, there's been about 7 rulings on gambling adverts. And I think it was really a sort of a wider piece of work about looking at the different rules, primarily the one about strong appeal to under 18s. And that's quite a tricky area, I think, for operators to navigate. And I think one of my colleagues was commenting on the Gary Neville piece of advertising, and that was a really tricky one. And I think it's indicative of the ASA approach to this now of the sort of strong appeal, and social media presence is a huge bit of a minefield, I guess, really for operators to work their way through, because it's not just about whether they have under 18s maybe subscribe to their content on X, for example, but they might have a significant percentage of people subscribing to other forms of social media that they're on, such as Snapchat or things like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's looking at what your overall social media presence is, and what that individual's appeal is to under 18s and youth culture, and that can be quite subjective. And I think it is quite a challenge for operators. I appreciate that, and it's one that no doubt we'll be having more discussions on in the future.
Yeah, I think there was a Jake Paul example, but definitely Gary Neville came straight to mind before you said it. So we kind of had a bit of on the same wavelength there. And I think if I was not to say it's right or wrong, but if I was an operator and I used Gary Neville in a tweet, for example, the argument is that he has an under 18 following, but the argument is also there that he's very analytical about the sport. So, sports bettors. I'm trying to word it that they'll take what he says seriously. So it almost feels like in one sense it's fair game. So I think if I was an operator and I kind of penalized for that, I wouldn't complain. I'd say okay, fair enough. But it's almost like a football call. It's a harsh one, that kind of thing.
It is a difficult avenue to navigate, and I think if you're ever in any doubt, get some advice. But I think the key take home is for operators that this is obviously a high priority area for the ASA. So just make sure you can be as compliant as possible.
Yeah, I'm not gonna put you on the spot and ask you if you think it's fair or not, because your job is ultimately to help operators stay compliant in this area. So whether it's fair or not really is almost a side issue. But I wanted to ask you, do you think it'll always be the case, and the SA it will only really increase in this direction? And I just wanted to use an example that I've just been thinking about this a lot. There's an AA advert on the UK which you may have seen, where they're robbing a bank, and because the AA fixes the car in time, the car gets off free. It's a great advert, it's fantastic, but I think you basically someone could complain to the ASA and say, hey, they're promoting robbing a bank. Like if a gambling company did that, I think it's immediately it'll never see the light of day again. So just wanted to ask, really, is gambling always going to be under more scrutiny than, I guess, the average industry?
It will be, because of the requirements under the license conditions and codes of practice, and the fact that there's a whole set of codes. So the CAP and BCAP codes, if you look there, talk about all kinds of different things that you can and cannot be seen to be doing. So even things like, you know, when we talk about strong appeal to under 18s, you know, it can be the colours you use, the imagery you use, maybe words even that you use. And there's quite a lot of guidance on that available to operators to have a look at. But yeah, I think because it is within the licence conditions and codes of practice, the gambling industry, it is always going to be under more scrutiny than most.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's fair, I suppose, if you you know, if you apply for that license, you see what's in the conditions and the codes, and yeah, that's that really. Given everything we've discussed, which has been quite a bit, Imogen, and there will be more to discuss, I'm sure, throughout the year. But if we were to kind of maybe sum up, you know, you've got the white paper, the obviously the stake limits, the financial checks, and we talked a bit about advertising. If there are any kind of main takeaway points for our viewers and obviously for operators in the UK market, and you've already maybe touched on a couple. If we were to conclude, you know, what would kind of the main takeaways be from your point of view?
So I think, you know, again, like we've said with the ASA and the fact that they've been active in 2023, and no doubt they still will be in 2024, making sure that you are compliant. And if you're not sure, go and have a look on the Gambling Commission's website, and there's quite a lot of guidance there, and it will direct you to the CAP and BCAP codes. And I guess the white paper, the key take home is, you know, everybody, whatever part of the industry you're in, whether you're a one-man band on the coast, or whether you're a, you know, a huge online operator, there's going to be changes coming for everybody. And it's making sure you follow the responses to the consultations, engage with any consultations that are due to come, and keep an eye on the fluctuating timelines, to make sure you give yourself plenty of time to prepare for any changes that you need to make within your business to make sure you're compliant going forward, really. And that sounds a really easy task. And I appreciate it's not, because, you know, you're part of this, you're constantly moving minefield as to what's going to come out. But I do think once we see the responses to the consultations, it will start to simplify the approach a little bit, and we'll have some clarity. So hopefully operators will be able to see a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, really.
Absolutely, no, well said, and I think you're right that there will be more change, and I'm sure we can discuss, we can catch up again and discuss anything big that comes in the pipeline. But Imogen, thank you very much for your time and for your answers. Plenty on the agenda, but I think operators, as you say, I think you summed it up well in terms of a bit of light, a bit of clarity at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and to our viewers, thanks for watching.